When you think about his position in the world, most people, I think, were kind of just like, oh, I was told not to like Vladimir Putin, so like, bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. If you start to learn about Russia, one of the books that probably has had the most influence in terms of my view of how some of the financial markets was Red Notice, Bill Browder's whole book, right? About the financial markets and kind of American investors, Russian investors. He mentions Putin in there as like just like a competitor basically in the market. And the next thing you know, becomes president. China seems to be like, somebody just put like more pieces on the chessboard. And there's obviously the concern that like China says like, oh, well, if Russia can invade Ukraine and like you guys are just going to sanction them, like Taiwan, come on over, right? Yeah. And so like whether that happens or not, what remains to be seen. But it does feel like those two countries, and they explicitly are talking about it, they want to get off the US dollar, they're starting to work together more, et cetera. Like, is there a world where we just get a bifurcation? And it's literally like, for better or worse terminology, I'll say like Western world and Eastern world. And basically in that bifurcation, literally there's two separate circular economies or insular economies that maybe are like frenemies. So maybe there's some crossover or, selling of goods and services or whatever. But for the most part, like Russia and China, try to produce and consume each other's goods and that works. And then the Western world does the same thing for themselves. And we don't have this like globalization happening.
100%. I mean, this has been happening since 2014. Yeah. Luke Groman over at Forest for the Trees is kind of a expert on a lot of these types of topics, him and Jeff Snyder. But they'll tell you, both of them, you're really going back 5, 6, 7 years, which is the world splintered. Jeff Snyder would say, hey, the world splintered in 2007 with the breaking of, sort of the Eurodollar network and the credit creation therein, or at least the former way of doing things. And, Luke Groman would suggest that the sort of global monetary system splintered in 2014 when the rest of the world really stopped sort of sterilizing our debts and deficits by stopping the accumulation of foreign exchange reserves, dollar-denominated foreign exchange reserves. And so since 2014, I would argue, I'm probably more in Lou's camp on this. Since 2014, we that drive, this sort of it's a realization amongst emerging market and amongst other kind of Eastern, if you will, central banks to say, hey, look, this system isn't working for us. The cost of capital is too high. The availability of capital is too scarce. We're not able to grow and meet our development needs, our goals to bring folks out of poverty and things, all that good stuff quickly enough because the supply and price of dollar-denominated credit, which is the global, most credit is denominated in dollars globally, it's too hard to obtain. And so I think we're very much on a path. I've always thought we were on a path towards bifurcated monetary systems. It's unclear at the speed of which, if that's all going to happen at once. And these things tend to happen like slowly. There's an event here, an event there, an event here. And then there's usually a big event that sort of catalyzes the big change. I'm not convinced that this is the big event that catalyzes the big change, but I am convinced that both Putin and President Xi of China are well aware that this is the path that we're on, and they're going to take every liberty to sort of perpetuate this, because ultimately it is a better outcome for them, which is to get off from underneath the sort of the foot of the dollar system.
So while we've been talking, Putin's made some more comments.
Man is on fire today.
Which is interesting, because I think exactly what you're saying. They've publicly talked about this, right? I remember we pulled it up yesterday. In 2018, I wrote a piece, and it was like Putin was at a conference. He basically was like, the U.S. dollar system sucks. It's too expensive. It's dangerous. We got to get off this thing. Like, he wasn't hiding anything, right?
No,
he was saying it right there in the conference. But he just said, Russia remains part of global economy. We do not plan to damage the system that we belong to. And he says that his partners, or Russia's partners, should understand that and should not push them out from the system. So again, we get into this, I'm going to call it gamesmanship. That might be too positive of a word, but I don't mean it in a positive way as much as maybe geopolitical chess is a better way to describe it. Where you get like, what are they saying? What does it mean? And then what are they doing?
Yeah.
And it feels like this like constant, don't kick us out from the system. We're part of the system. We want to be part of the U.S. dollar-based, financial system. Like, it's all the right things to say, but it seems like they've positioned themselves for a different world.
I have a great analogy for this.
All right,
man.
let's hear it.
So good. So One of my guilty pleasures of being a engaged man now is watching Vanderpump Rules on Bravo with my fiance. And this is so reminiscent of Jax being a total asshole to Brittany because he wants her to break up with him. So he's not the bad guy for breaking up with her, this like total angelic sweetheart. And finally, he just snaps and breaks up with her.
Yep.
And so this to me, it seems like he's like kicking and screaming, trying to hopefully he gets pushed out of the system so he can finally say to China, hey, look, we need to advance this pretty aggressively. Right. To me, and one thing I also think in terms of this bifurcation process, it's not going to come without the loss of human life. It's not going to come without great financial and economic costs. Right. It's stasis is generally preferred if you're thinking about, generating profits, right? Whenever you have big change, it makes the whole thing kind of slow down and grind to a halt. And so it's a lot to lose for all parties involved to make this transition. But the reality is that I think the folks that are sort of on the wrong side of the dollar system, if you will, Russia, China, a lot of emerging markets, I think they've gotten to the point where they're like, there's a lot to lose if we stay. Right. And so they're kind of kicking and screaming, hopefully to get dumped so we can go, really transition at a more expeditious pace. And more importantly, explain it to their citizens. Right. They got to market this to Chinese citizens, to Russian citizens as, hey, look, see, they kicked us out of the SWIFT system, the global dollar system. We got to transition. You got to deal with this pain for now, but we got to make this transition. And I think they're looking for political air cover to do that. But who knows if we'll give it to them at this particular juncture again.